Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. As you know, many of us have been covering this case about Sean Diddy Combs for quite some time. In fact, I've been attending his trial every day for about 8 weeks. And throughout the 8 weeks, I've been coming back sharing with you guys various points about what I've seen and observed in court. And today we're going to do a summary of the final conclusion of this matter. And I have with me criminal defense attorney
Summary.
Calvin Johnson and also DJ Genesis of Detroit. All right. Calvin, could you tell us about yourself and where everyone can find you?
My name's Attorney Calvin D. Johnson. I've been practicing law in Texas for the last 24 years, almost 25 years. I handle criminal defense at the local, state, and federal level. I've handled a number of cases in the federal courts. I'm licensed in Texas. Like I said, I'll be here my 24th year. My 25th year will be next year. I can be reached at attorneycalvindjohnson@gmail.com. My website is theywon'tletmeout.com. And my phone number is 214-565-5600. I also represent a couple of local entertainment artists here in Dallas. And I used to formerly work for NBA player Chris Bosh of the Toronto Raptors and Miami Heat. So that's what I've done, and that's what I'm about.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Last week, Sunday, right before they did the deliberation for the jury, we did our own show and with our own closing arguments. And I think it's amazing how we were able to break down the case and really shoot down a lot of the charges that were against Mr. Combs. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's one thing that we talked about. I made some arguments, and what I did is I had my staff go back and watch some of the comments I made. And remember, I said about the government and the dislike for the government sometimes because they can overcharge things. And there may be people on this jury, and my words were this: there'll be people on this jury that say, I really don't trust the government. Like I told you, the attorney said he didn't care about the judge getting mad at him. They really don't trust the government. They think the government sometimes they do too much. They overcharge you, and they were trying to throw the book at him on something that he probably shouldn't have had the book thrown at him on. And I said that there's a kind of backlash against the federal government when you think about it. And I had this conversation with somebody. I said, well, look, when Trump was doing his thing, he turned the FBI into a pariah for some people. People didn't look at the FBI the way they looked at it. They didn't look at the FBI as the protector. They looked at the FBI as the system coming after their people. And you still have the pervasive attitudes, not just in Black America, but now white America, about the authorities doing too much. And I think the Sean Puffy Combs is an example. The Sean Puffy Combs case is an example of government doing too much and overcharging him. Don't get me wrong. Is Mr. Combs guilty of some crimes? Yes, he has been found guilty of a couple of crimes. But was it a RICO? I just didn't think it was a RICO. I didn't think that the government should have charged him with a RICO. Honestly, I thought this was more of a state case as opposed to a federal case. But with that being said, look at the verdict that they got. I was pretty spot on about this jury not just co-signing to some of the foolishness that the government was putting out there.
Okay. The prosecutors and the judge were very upset with the Mark Agnifilo when he said you can't trust the government. Why do you think that was the case?
Because they know. And when I say they know, there are a lot of people that felt that way, but we're not saying it. But as an attorney, you want to make sure that you make your best argument to the jury. And the government knows that there's a pervasive attitude where some people just don't trust the federal government. And when you think about it, a lot of these prosecutors got their jobs under Democratic administrations, previous administrations. And a lot of folks don't trust the government. And when you don't trust the government, you're not trusting the government and you're not trusting the court system. So I think that the prosecutor as well as the judge probably took those comments personal and got mad at the defense attorney when he's only trying to defend his client. And as a defense attorney, I would have did the same thing. They just would have got mad at me. I'd have took that out. But I need to let them know, hey, you got to think about what's happening here. They have overcharged this case.
Comey stood up and she said to the judge, Your Honor, we had agreed that he would not do this and say anything of a nature like not trusting the government. What kind of proceeding would that have been to set the stage for that not happening?
They would have talked about things before in a conference before the deliberations happened. A lot of the times, the prosecutor probably knows that the defense attorney will say something like that, and they will address it with the judge and not on the record a lot. Sometimes they'll have a conversation and say, hey, look, this is what you can say and can't say. We would, you shouldn't be saying this. And that's the concern that the prosecutor probably brought up to the judge. They probably had a conversation. He probably admonished the defense attorney not to say anything like that. The defense attorney probably argued back and probably said, I have a right to say it. I'm defending my client. I'm not only saying don't trust the government. Don't trust the government today. We shouldn't trust the information that they're giving out today. We have a right to say that. That's part of the argument. And maybe he lost that argument privately and said it anyway. And that's probably what I would have done, to be honest with you. I pretty much followed the judge's orders. But in a situation like this where I'm fighting my client's life and I really feel like you can't trust the government in that situation, I may have done the same thing.
What were your thoughts when you heard that he was not guilty of racketeering, count one?
I knew that if they convicted of anything else, I felt like it was going to be the small stuff. It wasn't going to be something that was big. And what went through my head is, like I said, because y'all know we did this show Sunday night. And one of my last comments, because I went back and watched it, I said, look, don't be surprised if they don't come back on that RICO charge, because to me, this isn't a RICO. I had spoken to another local Dallas prosecutor who works for the DA's office, and they didn't think it was a RICO. They thought he was guilty of some of the crimes that they were charging him with, but they said this wasn't a RICO. I felt like it wasn't a RICO. In addition to that, I think there's a pervasive attitude from the public, this particular public, when they see this kind of stuff going on, that this was not a RICO. To me, this was very bad behavior and a number of personal relationships. There was a lot of freaky stuff going on. There was a lot of sexual behavior type things that maybe the general public may not have approved of. But for the most part, any of those women that Puffy had relationships with, most of those relationships at some point were willing relationships, and they kind of knew the parameters upon which of what they were getting into. And to turn that into a RICO is something, to me, is an overcharge. And I think that the citizens of the United States and the citizens out there in Brooklyn, out there in New York, said no.
Before the verdict came through, there was a going back and forth with the jurors about, I think the judge said that both sides were unpersuaded as far as this RICO goes. What do you think was actually happening at that point?
I think that they were probably arguing about whether they could find him guilty of just the particular crimes without finding him guilty of a RICO. And I think that's where they probably needed a clarity, because the way that probably the charge was read was, if he has these predicate offenses that he committed, all it takes is for these offenses to be a RICO, and then you can find him guilty of that RICO because you found him guilty of these two things. But I think what they were probably concerned about is, what if we believe that he's guilty of these two things, but not guilty of a RICO? And so I think they probably needed clarity on that. And I think that they probably got that clarity that allowed them to say, hey, on these two particular charges, we will find him guilty on. We're unanimous about. But these other 3 or 4 or 5 charges, we're not unanimous about, and we don't think that the behavior and the two guilties that we're finding him of equate to a RICO. And as a group, we don't want to find him guilty of a RICO. We want to know if we can or we can't. And I think that when they looked at everything, I think they said to themselves, well, the government brought this case. There are no police reports. There's no individual statements before the government got involved that said a crime had been committed. When you talk about the arson, you talk about the attempted arson, you talk about the kidnapping, nobody filed a police report. Nobody came forward and took anything to the authorities. Nobody called the police in any of this stuff. And so when you have that kind of situation, they probably was like, no, we're not going to find him guilty of a RICO. This isn't overcharge. And that's kind of what I said Sunday night.
Do you think that the jury is advanced enough to see that they use R. Kelly's RICO to kind of set the stage for Sean Puffy Combs? And if they had found him guilty of a RICO, that could potentially set the stage for people at large, even your local mechanic getting a RICO charge.
I think that they did do some of that. I think R. Kelly's situation is a little different because I think he has included underage individuals. And so anytime you include underage individuals, that's a whole nother level. But I think in this situation, the jury saw a lot of 25-year-old plus adults making some decisions in relationships and what their sexual norms were going to be and not be. And that these folks were not being kidnapped or sex trafficked in the way that we see sex trafficking, right? When I think sex trafficking, I think of a pimp taking people across state lines against their will, them not being able to leave when they want to leave, them not having phones, them not having the ability to tell their loved ones. Those are the type things that I see when I think of sex trafficking. And I think the general public, when they see sex trafficking, they don't see Sean Puffy Combs as a sex trafficker. They see him as somebody who has maybe out of the ordinary social norms that most of us are used to, but they don't see him as a sex trafficker. Now, what I think they did see, what they did find him guilty of, is transporting people for the purposes of prostitution. And is he guilty of that based on what the law is and based on the testimony? Yes. But I don't think they saw Mr. Combs as a sex trafficker, and I don't think that they saw that as a RICO, and I think the jury honestly made the proper decision here.
Also, you covered count 2 and 3. Let's get to count 4, sex trafficking of Jane Doe. Were you shocked to hear her not guilty?
No, I was not. Because what happens in those situations, like I said before, you got a situation where you got a person that is of age, a person that has been in a relationship with Mr. Combs, a person who participated in freak offs with Mr. Combs before, a person who Mr. Combs is still helping or has helped in the past. When you have a situation like this, that it did not surprise me that they did not find Mr. Combs guilty of sex trafficking at that point, because once again, when you look at it, these people were in some kind of relationship at some point. They made some decisions to either do it or not do it. In addition to that, they had the ability to say no. They had the ability to leave. Now, will Mr. Combs cut them off if he says no or she says no and they leave? Possibly, but it's not being done against their will. They and you think about it, they didn't make any police reports. They didn't complain to anybody about it. As a matter of fact, after the act itself, they continued to maintain a contact with Mr. Combs and continued to see Mr. Combs after that. And I think the jury is smart, right? They're going to look at that situation and say, well, wait a minute. Somebody can accuse me of sex trafficking after we've been in this relationship, and after the relationship stops and a year down the line, they're going to be able to come back and say this relationship, because I maybe coerced them into a sexual act that maybe they didn't really want to do, or they at the time I didn't know they wanted to do, or they can go back a year. And I mean, I'm not making any excuses for them, but I think that the jury is looking at this like, well, wait a minute, that's a bit far for us. In addition to that, people don't understand the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these things happen. So when I'm a jury and I'm sitting back and I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you've done several freak offs with Puffy, but you said this one was one you didn't want to do, but you did it. And you felt this way about it. But after that, you called Mr. Combs, and after that, you did another freak off. And after that, y'all maintained a relationship, or y'all maintained a cordial relationship. You never filed any police reports. You never complained to anybody else. When a jury sees that, not saying that we don't believe women when they say that they have been abused or they've been pushed into something, the jury is looking at that and saying, that's reasonable doubt to me, because if you've been involved in freak offs with them before, you didn't want to do this particular one, but maybe you did one or two after, and you maintain a relationship, a friendly relationship with him after that, they're going to say that's not beyond a reasonable doubt to me. And so it did not surprise me that they found him not guilty of that one.
So let me give you a little inside the main courtroom information. Cassie's attorney came back to court. He was there originally maybe 3 weeks ago or so. He came back to court for the last week. And when it came down to the verdict, I guess he submitted the letter for Cassie objecting to allowing Mr. Combs to go home. Is that pretty normal?
I think that it is normal, because Cassie has to hold out that she's trying to protect her own honor, remember? So she's going to say, I still feel threatened by him. He's still powerful. I don't want him to come home. She's trying to save her own face. And in addition to that, she may feel some type of way about him being home, her not being safe, because let's be honest, Puffy does have a lot of resources at his disposal. But I think it was a little weird for the attorney to do that. But when you look back at the relationship and you look back at what has happened in this situation, and that Cassie's married to another man at this point, and Cassie still feels like she went through a lot of stuff that she shouldn't have had to go through, it didn't surprise me that she wanted to keep him locked up. It didn't surprise me at all.
With this case, when you think about Bonner saying that her and Cassie made up certain parts of the story, especially when it came to the balcony hanging Bonner off, turns out that Diddy wasn't even in town. When you see discrepancies in a case like that, does it make the whole witness get thrown out, or you just have to focus on maybe the lies that are being told at the time?
Once a witness lies to you and you were not there, and there's not a video or additional physical evidence that showed something happened, and there is a verifiable lie that they told, and it's not just a little bitty lie. I mean, it's a big red from the 5 heartbeats, I'm going to hang you out the window lie. What are my office hours? 9 to 5, hang them out the window off the balcony and let them throw up and then pull them back up. That's not a little bitty lie. That's not a little white lie. That's a big, bold-faced lie when he wasn't even in town. If I hear that as a juror, I'm not going to believe anything that person says, because hanging somebody off the balcony, that's a serious lie. Because if I believe as a juror that this man is dangerous enough to hang somebody off a balcony, and I believe that could substantially cost him a lot of time. And when I know he wasn't in town and that didn't happen, and you make up a lie that says that happened, I'm not going to believe you. Whatever you say to me that you can't show me physical evidence, video evidence, or anything else of that actually happened, I am not going to believe you as a juror.
Could any of this have been used to try to get him bail?
It's not really something that could be used to get him bail when it comes to the lies. When it comes to bail, you have to take in these things. Is the person a flight risk? Puffy has unlimited resources. They'll probably consider him a flight risk. Is he a danger to himself, the public, or the community at large? Now, of course, he's going to say, I'm not a danger. You could put me on house arrest. I'm not going to go anywhere. But the argument is going to be made because he is a man of wealth and resources, that he can make things happen. Even if he's free and at home, he can make things happen. But if he's locked up, the government can manage and watch every single thing he does. And so there is going to be is he a threat to himself, any of the particular victims, or the community at large? And is he a flight risk? They're going to own those 2 points. Gonna say he should be remain to be locked up. Put it like that. Agree with that? Not really. I think they probably should have let him go home. However, I do see the argument that he is a man of means, that he does have a lot of resources and wealth. And when you have money and you're a man of means, you can make things happen. And so they want to cover themselves. And then that judge as well, he wants to cover himself, because if Mr. Combs does get out and something happens to one of the witnesses or somebody involved in this case, the judge is going to look bad. So a lot of judges will just say, nah, I ain't letting you out, man. And that's kind of what happened.
So they had this debate in court about letting him out. And the judge made a statement. He said, I'm going to make a decision on this right away. And he said we'd come back at 1 o'clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he made the statement because I'm sure Mr. Combs do not want to go back to the BDC, the jail.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment, I saw Diddy's eyes light up like he's out of here. And most of the people in the audience, like, he's getting out of here, right? We were kind of doing little bets that he's going to be home today. The judge came back at the end of the day with a different tone. What do you think happened?
I think what he thought about is the optics of this, because Mr. Combs is a man of resources, money, and influence. And he didn't want to make it look like that he was going soft on somebody that had been convicted of prostitution, trafficking for the purposes of prostitution, or moving people for the purposes of prostitution. And with everything that had happened in the case, the judge did not want to give the optics that he was being a light on somebody that a lot of people think hurt people. And I think that's kind of what that is. I think he didn't want to catch any backlash. I do think he has some concerns about Puffy being a man of money and influence. And to be honest with you, do I think Puffy at this point is going to do something to nobody? Absolutely not. Because he's not going to endanger himself with getting charged with another crime, because he just went through hell fighting this case within itself. I mean, you had your whole life put out there. I don't think Puffy is dumb enough to go and do anything else, especially why I'm waiting to be sentenced. He's not going to do anything else, I don't think. But with that being said, I think the optics were bad for the judge if the judge let him go home. A lot of people would have been up in arms, and I think that's why he made Puffy remain to be locked up. I think that's what I think happened.
All right. So again, I've been in court every day for this trial, and the judge actually mentioned he went back down memory lane. He used the defense, Mark Agnifilo, the attorney's words against him. In the opening arguments, he said, listen, we're going to own domestic violence. He's done some violent things. The judge brought that up as a reason. He's like, well, you're the one that conceded that he did these violent acts, so that's why we have to keep him in. He used the attorney's words against him. What do you think?
I think it was smarter the judge to do that if he wanted to have Puffy remain locked up. I see what the judge did there, and it wasn't a mistake for the defense attorney to do that, what he did and what he said, because what you want to do is typically you want to frame what you think that the state is going to say, but you want to get it out first. You want to go ahead and admit to some things, because what you don't want is you kind of hedging your bets. You don't want a RICO conviction. You don't want them to equate domestic violence, because you know they're going to see the video. So there's no way in the world that you're going to say that he wasn't violent towards some people because you got the video. We know that that's there. But what you want to make sure you understand that he may have been a violent person at times to certain people, but this isn't a RICO. And I think the defense attorney was conceding that he had been violent because he knows in opening statements, I want to tell the jury, yes, you're going to see a video of my client being violent, but don't take that violence and turn it into a RICO. I think that's what the defense did. But on the back end, it did hurt him a little bit, because at that point, you have admitted that he has been violent before. And that's a problem for him. And remember how I said, what do we consider when we think about bail? Is he a flight risk? And is he a threat to himself or others or the community at large? And if you are somebody that they think has a little bit of either history or you have done some domestic violence against women, it's going to create a situation where they don't give you bail if they think that that is serious enough. And in Mr. Combs' situation, you have a video in a hallway where a lot of people looked at that and said that that was pretty bad. And so with that being said, that's why they didn't give him bail.
Diddy's main attorney, Mark Agnifilo, he looked at a lot of cases, came back to the judge and said, basically, my client was not making $1 million like some of these other cases off of prostitution of individuals. He was actually like a customer. Mm-hmm. And since when does a customer of 2 cases get such a harsh statement on bail?
And that's the thing too, and that's one thing we got to realize what he's accused of, and he is more of a customer. He's not somebody who did it to gain money, and that's the other issue that we're going to discuss here. A lot of the pimps and the those guys, a lot of those pimps and the heads of the escorting agencies, they make a lot of money in sex trafficking. The pimps make a lot of money because they are providing the services and getting hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars off of this. What the lawyer is basically saying is Puffy is doing this to self-satisfy and to satisfy his needs and wants in open sexual relationships with people that he's in relationships with. He's a customer. He's not somebody that's actually making money and benefiting from the behavior and exploiting the people. He's somebody who's a customer, who's bringing them in and hiring the people. He's not doing this to enrich his pockets or make a lot of money. He's doing this to gratify himself, as opposed to making millions of dollars and being in danger of going out and trafficking other people. And see, that's why Mr. Agnifilo made that argument. I think it's a great argument. But with that being said, I think that the judge was smart in trying to use Mr. Agnifilo's words against him. But Mr. Agnifilo did not make a mistake by making a statement he made. He had to hedge his bets, and I think he did a good job of that. Because remember, we were wondering, like, dang, he's not going to put any witnesses on. He's not going to, and I told y'all, once again, give it to Cal again. I told y'all, I said, sometimes when you think that case is weak as one pack Kool-Aid, you don't drink it. And they're going to tell the jury not to drink it. And what did the jury do? They sipped it a little bit, but they did not drink it. They did not gulp it. They gave it one sip, put it down, said that's one pack Kool-Aid. Let's give this man 4 to 5 years and let's get out of here. That's what they did. Kool-Aid wasn't sweet enough.
So what I'm about to say might be out of pocket, but after sitting in court for 8 weeks, not missing a day or a moment, it's hard for me to separate the judge from the government or the prosecutors. Am I wrong?
You're
Aren't they
not
on the
wrong.
same team? They're on the same team.
And that's the way it is most of the time. And for defense attorneys, man, we go in there sometimes because you have to realize a lot of the prosecutors are in particular judges' courts more than the lawyers are.
Right.
And sometimes they develop relationships where you have very conservative judges at times that are up there, and they tend to side with the prosecution. Now, the judges are supposed to be unbiased. We know that. But when you go to certain places and certain courts and you see certain individuals being on trial, Sean Puffy Combs is a black man. He's a billionaire. He's a high value target that they spend a lot of time, money, and resources on convicting. Of course, I'm going to see the judge in the state, the federal government as one. And remember, the defense attorneys did see them as one, because what happened? When the defense attorney felt like me saying that we can't trust the government, telling the jury they can't trust the government, and they're getting mad at me, I'm going to say it anyway. Because for one thing is, I'm worried about my client. I'm not worried about them. And that's just what he did. And that's just the way he played it. And he played it properly. I'm going to tell y'all this. Sean Puffy Combs' defense played this properly. They did. I'm going to tell you right now. At the end of the case, not calling Mr. Combs to the stand is exactly what I would have done too. I wouldn't have called him because I said, look, this Kool-Aid is weak. We're not going to let them make strong Kool-Aid. We're not going to give them any more sugar. We're not going to give them more Kool-Aid packets. They're not going to make this a stronger case because what they put on is kind of weak. It's weak sauce. And it was proven that it was weak sauce. Now, I want everybody to understand, I'm not taking up for Mr. Combs. I'm not taking up for what he did. I'm not taking up for what he got convicted of. But I'm going to keep it real. This was not a RICO. And we should not be charging people in these types of situations with RICOs. And I think that it had a terrifying future when it comes to charging other people when this kind of stuff happened with RICOs. This wasn't a RICO. This was very bad behavior. This was some questionable sexual activity. This was a bunch of unrelated, maybe offenses, but this wasn't a RICO.
So he's been predominantly found not guilty. Why is it that people would not accept it? They won't let it go?
Because in today's society, we have the Me Too movement, which, let's be real, let's be honest. Women definitely want to be believed. Listen, I have a wife, I have a sister, I have a daughter, I have sisters, I have nieces, I have a mother. I don't want any woman being abused. I don't want any woman being hurt. And a lot of people as women, especially our women, when you see something, a particular thing happen to a woman, you want the person to be thrown under the jail. But there's something called the law. And if you want to find him guilty of transporting people for the purposes of prostitution, okay, fine. If you want to find him guilty of domestic violence, of assaulting Cassie, okay, fine. But those things are not a RICO. You don't get to RICO somebody behind that kind of behavior. And I'm not sounding insensitive for whatever who believes what. But this case, he did commit some crimes in terms of transporting people. But what he did commit wasn't a RICO. And I think that people have to accept that. They might not want to accept that, but they're going to have to just accept it.
Do you think the jury could have just given him those 2 charges because they wanted to just give him something?
No, I think that they probably believed that he transported people for the purposes of prostitution. And I think that they wanted to be honest with themselves about that. And I think that they were. But I think they were truly honest with themselves by not finding him guilty of a RICO, because what they did see, and I think what they basically told the government, yeah, we see a couple of crimes here, and the other stuff you charged them with, we have concerns about that being proved beyond a reasonable doubt. But this RICO thing, when there's no police report, there's no victim reports, there's no written police reports or statements before the government started investigating it privately, that wasn't a RICO. And when you think about RICOs, you got to remember, typically RICOs involve situations where you're continuing a criminal enterprise and that criminal enterprise is making money because of the behavior that exists inside of the RICO, right? In this situation, nobody's making continuous money. Nobody's continuing to do this to make this organization bigger, better, and for the purposes of continuing certain behaviors and continuing to make money. This wasn't the purpose of that. The purpose of this was to gratify somebody's sexual wants and desires and what they preferred. And in addition to that, there was some behavior upon which you had escorts, and you brought them over here with the purposes of participating in sexual behavior, and they found you guilty of that. But that's not a RICO. And I agree with the decision of this particular jury. I think they did an excellent job.
Did you find it strange that they had to go find his girlfriends and investigate them? They didn't find some random girls along the way who said Sean Puffy Combs did this to me, like you would normally hear with sex trafficking?
And see, that's what I get concerned about, because any of the sex trafficking cases I've been involved with, you would have multiple women that were never really in relationships with the pimp. They may have met the pimp one day, maybe slept with him once, and the next thing you know, they're out there turning tricks. And they don't have phones. They can't leave. They go state to state. They're typically being abused. They typically are charging money. They typically are being put out there and pimped out there to make the pimp thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That's not what was going on here. That wasn't the behavior that was going on here. And so what they did was they went and literally found people that were in open relationships with Mr. Combs. Let's be honest. Cassie know he had other women. Cassie know he did other things. Jane Doe know he did other things. The other women he was involved with knew he did other things. How can you not? Y'all are bringing escorts in. It's an open relationship. Now, is it normal for what the general public perceives to be normal? No. But it's America. He can do what he wants to do.
Once the verdict came through, Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead attorney, stood up. He gave a great summation of as to he has a private jet. We can get it here. We want to get him out of here, whatever it takes, But Comey stood up and says, this guy has did all of this stuff. Now, he's just been acquitted of a lot of this, and she's rattling it off. He's did all these horrible things, and he can get up to 20 years, 10 years for each count, 2 counts. What are your thoughts?
And see, that's the thing. I think at the end of the day, it's a situation upon which I think from what they were saying, he's going to fall between 53 and 61 months based on the point system. And he's already did 10 months. So what I'm guessing, if I'm correct, and if they run them concurrent, and I think that they should, he would get anywhere with all the time that he spent so far, as well as you can take 6 months off for a drug program you take. And plus you can really do 85% of your time in the federal system. I think that he'll be looking at anywhere from an additional 3 years to 3.5 more additional years with what he's already served. So 3 to 3.5 more years incarcerated really is his range based on what I see, unless they don't run them concurrent.
Okay, so here's a question I have for you. Somebody's calling me. 1 second here. Okay. So when it came to the decision about his bail, as I told you in the morning, the judge seemed like he was going to send him home. He says, I'm sure Mr. Combs don't want to go back to the BDC, which is a jail. Mm-hmm. His tone changed when he came back at 4:30. I saw that before with juror number 6. In the morning, he said there was a problem with the juror. And he says it's probably just a language issue or maybe a misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. But when the judge came back at the end of the day, he's out of here. Get rid of juror number 6. Mm-hmm. Something caused his mind to change. So I'm just going to ask you, let's do a little conspiracy. Is he getting a call from Uncle Sam or maybe the prosecutors are leaning on him a little bit, or is he coming to his own rationalization about the situation?
He may be getting a call from other judges. He may be getting a call from Uncle Sam.
Whoa.
I don't, I can't say that.
Right.
I can't say that, but I would imagine that as federal judges, we don't want to send the general public itself a bad sign in terms of, hey, somebody gets convicted of these particular crimes and we just gonna let him hop on a private jet, go back to his mansion and sit there and wait to be sentenced. I think the optics of that were bad. In addition to that, I think he probably thought about it a little bit. And then judges, they think about things too. And they watch stuff that's going on in the world, and they're probably thinking like, well, wait a minute, I need to be careful because I don't want to be the judge that lets Sean Puffy Combs get on a private jet and fly home after something like this. In addition to that, I do have concerns about his power and influence and his money. So I'm not going to take that chance. I'm just going to leave him locked up. And I think that's what he probably thought about it, because initially what I think the judge probably thought was, hey, it looks like Mr. Combs is probably going to get found guilty of a lot more than just those two charges. And then when he didn't get found guilty of those two charges, I mean, the more than the two charges, that's when he probably started thinking about maybe allowing him to go home on bond, because the charges that he got convicted of were the two least serious. But I think that he probably realized, and people can say what they want to say, but I know the judges watch the news. I know they listen to the radio, and I know they watch YouTube. They know how people are feeling out here in the general public. And I think that when everything came down, he probably saw some stuff and said, nah, I'm not going to catch the brunt of this one. I'm just going to leave Mr. Combs locked up, and then I'm just going to make him stay here through sentencing. Because anyway, to be honest with you, they're going to have to sentence him to some time, and we don't know when sentencing is going to be. So when they do sentence him, he'll already have this additional time served. And the other thing I want to go with y'all through, and I'm glad this is a good point to do this, what happens when somebody gets sentenced and they get found guilty of a federal charge? What will happen is there'll be a particular amount of points attached to the charge. The behavior that caused that particular charge to happen, and inside of that, the person's criminal history gets taken into account. You can get added points or you can get subtracted points. And what happens is a federal probation officer interviews you. They ask you about your family. They ask you if you have any drug problems. They ask you about your criminal history. They ask you about, had any mental problems? Do you have any drug problems? They go through your background, who raised you, how far you went in school, what kind of job you have you ever been in trouble before? They'll go through all those things to determine what they're going to do with you. So you got to make sure that when that happens, that they'll get a report, and when they get that report, they'll come up with a recommendation and a range, okay? And the government will say, hey, we're going to ask for the top of that range. The defense attorneys are going to say, we're going to ask for the bottom of that range, and then we go from there, okay? So that's what they're going to do. And then there's going to be a report issued. The state will argue that it should be higher. The defense will argue it'll be lower, or the defense will file what they call an objection. So let's say 2 or 3 points got added that they didn't think should be there. Then they're going to object to those points being added, and they're going to make their arguments for that. And one of the things that can cause you points is if you had a prior conviction that was a felony, that gets you 3 additional points. If you have a prior conviction that's a misdemeanor, that will get you additional points. And so that's what kind of happens when you're doing these kinds of cases. And so that's kind of what it is, and that's what you gotta be careful about.
Does it make sense for him to appeal the decision?
It doesn't make sense for him to appeal the decision. I'm sorry, I'll have to change my filming location here real quick, but it doesn't make sense for them to file an appeal. from a standpoint of if he files an appeal, what could happen? What could happen is that he could end up literally having to fight all those charges over again.
What?
He should not appeal because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, he really got lucky with this deal. He should be smart, and he should take his licks, take his ball, and go home.
Wow. So let me ask you another question. I saw this online. He was acquitted of various charges, but they say the judge could factor in those charges if he wanted to when he does the sentencing. Is that true?
It is, because when you get sentenced, the judge can take into account what you've been convicted of or your prior bad acts. See, bad acts are not convictions, right? So when you're going into sentencing, they not only can take your convictions into account, but they can consider your prior bad acts. A bad act would be like, okay, even though I'm not charged with assaulting Cassie, I did assault Cassie, it's on video. If I had a situation where I got into a fight in a nightclub and somebody got hurt and I paid a settlement out, they can take that into account. Or if I had some other bad behaviors through my years of running bad boy, and those things are against individuals, even though I've not been convicted of those things, they could use those things as well.
Wow. So, but what about the things that were acquitted? The count 1 RICO, all the things under the umbrella of count 2 and count 4. Can he factor those in under sentencing, even though they've been acquitted?
It's not like he's factoring those in. He can factor some of the behaviors of those things in. It's not like he's saying that you did them. No, you didn't get convicted of those. But there were certain behaviors that occurred in those instances, those acts that may not be crimes, but may not be things that somebody would consider to be good things. And then they could use those things against him, not the actual crimes, but the bad acts.
Okay, we're going to go to Zion Warchild, and then we're also going to see if DJ Genesis has anything to say. Zion, talk to us.
If it pleases the court.
How you doing, my brother?
How you doing, y'all? You know what I'm saying? Glad to be here. You know, I had to throw on my tie just to, you know what I'm saying, to fit in. You know what I mean? But I agree with you. What I think is that the judge said something to the regard that the defense did not provide or offer any evidence that Diddy would not be a threat to the community or to others. So when the judge asked, you know, Diddy personally, he said, you know, do you want to go home? What do you think about this bond thing? And Diddy, with his hubris, just like you said before, all he did was do like this and be silent, right? What he should have did was he should have actually addressed the judge and say, listen, Your Honor, you know what I'm saying? If you know, if at all possible, I would like to go home and see my children, also seek the help that I need. Going through this trial has shown me a lot about myself and things that I need to fix, so that if he had went into that kind of discussion when the judge opened the door or opened the window for him to have a discussion, the judge would have had a greater opportunity for judicial discretion to actually let him go home.
Okay,
but then
Zion.
He would probably place stipulations like, you know, well, okay, when you get home, you know, this is what you have to do. I want to see anger management, these kind of classes, this, that, and the other. He lost that opportunity.
Okay,
and you know
so
what I would have said? Let me say this, and I agree with you 100%. Yeah. I would have had, this is what I would have had Diddy do. I would have had him do what you just said. In addition to that, I would have said, Judge, I will go home if you just give me my family and my kids, I won't talk on the telephone. I won't use the internet. I will stay at my location where I live. I will not make any contact to the outside world outside of going to my counseling that I need, outside of doing the anger management that I need, outside of spending time with my loved ones. I will not even make any contact with anybody outside of my household, period. I would have said something like that. And I would have said, Judge, whatever condition you want to place on me, if you want to have all my other family members out of my house by 7 p.m., if you don't want me to have any other visitors outside of my family and my loved ones, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do. I would have availed myself to the court. I would have had Puffy ready for that. But I think that if there's a mistake that was made, and there's nothing against the attorneys, they were probably just happy to get the verdict that they got. And they probably got the vibe that the judge might let him go home. But to me, I deal with my worst case scenario. I have my guys ready. Our job is to see that coming and to make that happen.
Okay, so as you know, I'm in the main courtroom sitting right behind Diddy. Diddy raised both of his hands. He wanted to talk to the judge. The judge told his attorney to talk to Diddy. He would not talk to him.
Okay.
So I just want you, that's what I was trying to tell you guys. So you guys come back on that, and I'm going to let DJ Genesis. Are you going to go, Genesis? I'm sorry.
Well, I want to hear about that first, and then I'll bring my question.
I'm going to say this to you, though.
Hold on.
But
I'm
to
going to
me,
put you down, and I'm going to put another guy up then.
Well, no, I want to say something. I just wanted to hear what the answer to that was.
And I want to say something. Typically, when it comes to bail, if you want to, you should be allowed to call your client.
Yes.
You should be allowed to call your client. Now, if the judge did that, I don't think that was fair. I think he had predetermined what his decision was going to be. But you at least hear the particular defendant out, because the lawyers should have asked the judge, we want to put on evidence that says he is eligible for bail. We should be let home. They should have put up a better argument at that point, because you're allowed to call your client, and your client's allowed to be heard.
Absolutely. He should have been allowed to at least address the court. But maybe the attorneys, didn't think ahead of time to petition for him to speak on his own behalf.
But you know one thing too?
Or prepare him for that. You know what I'm saying?
But you know one thing too? They probably felt like the energy coming from that judge was kind of off. And they probably felt like, hey, he's going to go ahead and say no anyway. Right. And we don't want to affect future sentencing later. Right? Because if we piss him off now, maybe he gives Puffy the top end later on. So you know what? It's not worth it, because that might cost him 6, 7, 8 months in time.
Well, at the end of the day, it gets all time served anyway.
Exactly.
Even if he was on home detention, according to federal mandates, federal guidelines, it would still be considered, it would still work in his favor a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking. And they probably didn't want to harm sentencing later. So they
just let him ride out with how they used to say back in the day, lay it down.
Lay it down. Lay it down. Lay it down. You're
just
right.
Lay it down. Yeah, just lay it down.
So my question is that okay? So so it wasn't Cassie that wrote the letter to the judge asking that P. Diddy be sent in, and I saw the other letter, and it looks like the letter was sent from the Cassie's same attorney. Is that correct, Mel? It looked like the actual signature that was on the bottom, that this came from Cassie's attorney.
I think it was
very possible. He was in the court.
Yeah, but he's allowed to speak for his client.
But no, that guy is not his client, right? So I'm trying to figure out how this attorney was able to use the what's the other other guy?
Deontay Nash.
Deontay Nash. How was the attorney for Cassie able to also submit a letter from Deontay Nash? Because if you look at the bottom, I think it's the same thing. Look like it's from the same lawyer. Did they have the same lawyer that we didn't know about?
I don't know. Mel, you answer that one.
It's a possibility that they could have had similar representation or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been necessary.
I don't think that's a big deal. I think that ultimately, when you think about it, Cassie's now a married woman. She's in a new relationship. She made some allegations against Puffy in this case and testified against him openly and freely. She's gonna say, "I don't want him free." I mean, we may not agree with how she feels about it, but whatever she went through it, and ultimately, I just think the judge did not want to have the optics and appearance that they were going too light on Puffy. And I think what the defense attorneys probably thought, like, let's not anger the judge, because whatever we want to do on the back end as far as trying to get him the lower amount of time, let's do that. That's what
So my main question is, do you think the letters had something to do with his decision?
I think they did, but I think he wasn't gonna let him go home anyway.
All right, that was the main thing I was trying to ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ronald.
Hello?
We hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you.
just had
Yes,
a quick, I'm sorry. Okay, I have a quick question for the attorney. I was wondering, is there any possible path that P. Diddy could have to not do any time?
And no, well, there is, because the sentencing guidelines are what we call advisory. When I say the sentencing guidelines are advisory, that is what the code basically says. In this situation, this individual should get this range of time or months, right? And most of the judges will follow the sentencing recommendations 95% of the time. 99% of the time, typically, to be honest with you. And I don't see a judge letting Puffy go home with no time and just be at the house. That's not going to happen. Not after the government put an 8-week case on, and the fact that you have some alleged domestic violence as a prior act in the case. They're not going to let him go home just like that. And give him no time,
Okay.
and disregard the sentencing guidelines. They're not going to do that.
Especially with the high profile nature of the case.
Yeah.
Socially speaking, and with society's watching, and all of the media attention, court TV. I watched the whole thing on court TV. I watch court TV religiously.
Yes.
So yeah, no, there was no way. I didn't think he was going to go home immediately, but I thought that he could have, if there was any opportunity for him to try to speak up for himself and, at least, take some accountability for his behavior.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That would have been more beneficial, but I knew he wasn't going home. Not immediately.
Yes.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Well, the other question is, because people keep bringing up the Trump pardon, right? Is there a limit on the amount of years that you have to have before Trump can pardon you? Like if it's 5 or 7 years, can he still pardon that little 5 to 7 years, or it has to be like over 10 years or a certain?
No, he can pardon you for whatever. He can pardon you for any amount of time. That pardon, that's a very powerful thing that President Trump holds as his Trump card. That's a very, very powerful thing. They can even pardon you after you die. And in the case of Jack Johnson, he was pardoned for the crimes that he got charged with after he passed away.
Posthumously, yep.
Exactly. So that pardon power is very, very powerful, and Mr. Trump holds it. And we won't have to, it looks like we won't have to deal with that now, but who knows?
So since the prosecutors took a big hit with their loss with this case, I mean, they lined it up 6 ladies. They were planning to have a big win. Do you think they're going to try to influence the case to try to win, what they lost through time,
Yeah, they're gonna try to go for the top of the range. They're gonna try to get him to max, which I've been told, and I gotta go double check, that it'll be 61 months based on where he'll probably fall.
Right.
And they're gonna try to get him the max amount of time and they're going to ask for that. And they could ask that those things
Consecutive.
be consecutively, which would give him 61 months twice. But he still would get credit for his back time on both. So, but what I'm telling you is that they're probably going to go for that. I don't think judge will stack the sentences. He's a first-time offender. Like if you had been somebody that had a longer criminal history, yeah, they'll stack him. But I don't think he'll stack him. But I think he may end up giving him closer to the higher range because of the high-profile nature of this case.
What about as far as this case being targeted? It came out in court. We talked about how the attorney for him said, you know, you can't trust the government. But these ladies went straight to civil. They did not come down to the Southern District and say, Mr. Combs did this to me. Will that have any determining factor on this case as far as sentencing?
I don't think it will, but I think for the optics of it, and Zion probably could say this too, when nobody made a report, nobody filed a police report, nobody came down on their own. And to be honest with you, the government literally went out and found these people. And because they were involved in some of this behavior themselves, told them, if you don't testify, we're going to charge you. We know they did that. So with that being said, I think that's going to factor in because it's not like a bunch of police reports were filed. There's not a lot of live pictures and video of stuff that happened outside of the situation with Cassie. Now you have some freak off stuff that was available there, but nobody at the time of the offenses, alleged offenses, called it a crime and reported it as such.
I absolutely concur. You know, that there's a lack of basis when there is no, you know, prior alleged, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think that we saw this with the Amber Heard, you know what I'm saying? Johnny Depp, Amber Heard case. You know what I'm saying? A lot of her testimony and her allegations were pretty much cast down simply because she did not take the initiative to make, you know, to make this a legal issue or matter until it was time to get financial.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that takes away from the credibility, and there really is no legal foundation or basis behind it besides maybe some financial gain that could factor in.
And just as a general public, when we think it's just being done for financial gain, when you never filed a police report, if somebody, and I'm not saying this because I don't want the victims of domestic violence to go
right, because they can be silent for other reasons. Correct.
Yeah, they can be silent for other reasons, but when the first thing you do is civil suit as opposed to ever making a report, that there's a concern there from the general public. I'm not a woman. I've never had to go through a lot of stuff our women go through, and like I said, believe me, I'm not going to make any excuses for Mr. Combs when it comes to Cassie and some of the other stuff that happened there.
Right.
But with that being said, when the first thing you do is go file a lawsuit and try to get some money, people are going to give you the side eye, and that's what happens. Let's be honest.
Right. Especially if there's that, like even if they didn't go to the police, if there's no medical reports, you know what I'm saying? Then you're really, you know, there is really very little to you know.
I'll take it one step further. There's no medical reports, there's no police reports, and that's not even a phone a friend and tell them what just happened.
Or even a text message. Right.
I'm just being honest.
And here's another question is that, for instance, okay, so now so again, legal precedence gets brought in. Okay, this is a precedence, right? So for the first time, a person gets charged with that charge, with that is this person's significant other. And the only person that probably, well, no, they both were like girlfriends of his. And then because they brought in someone else as a prostitute to hook up with them, now this becomes a legal precedence that it can that be only, is that only federal or state as well? You know, how does this work?
It's precedent federally because the federal courts is what you're worried about the most because they're the more serious. They're the more serious the entity that can come after you.
Yep.
And I want you to think about this, y'all know, like Why y'all think Russell Simmons went? I hate to say this. He went to Bali because he's worried about stuff like this. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. He doesn't want somebody to come snatch him up out of some situation where maybe he didn't really do anything, even abuse anybody. He just had multiple girlfriends that maybe did freaky stuff, and then all of a sudden y'all trying to charge me with a RICO because somebody later on came and said I did this and sued me. He doesn't want that to happen to him, and I'm not pointing the finger at Russ. I'm just saying it was going to set a precedent for men to be extremely careful when dealing with these open, sexually adventurous relationships.
Right.
And that could be a problem, not just for our Black folks. It could be problematic for other people of means, white men of means, Hispanic men of means, period.
Imagine if Hugh Hefner had been.
Oh, we ain't gonna even go there.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Hugh Hefner?
Yeah.
He would have had multiple RICO charges.
Yeah.
Let's keep it 100.
Yeah.
Because
that's what I'm talking about.
Because they failed at this one, do you think it would be hard for the government to bring the next RICO on someone of Diddy's caliber?
It will. I think they'll catch a lot of backlash if they try to do this again. And then in addition to that, President Trump is watching this. And him and the people that he probably knows say, hey, man, you need to shut this down over here, man. What y'all doing? Man, we all did some stuff, I'm just being honest.
That's a fact.
We've all done some stuff, and we maybe shut that down over there. They're not going to want that to continue to happen again.
We still haven't seen the Epstein files. So
bingo. Weinstein or Epstein.
But here's the thing, though. All right. So even though the RICO didn't get charged, this is my question. Prostitution. What was the charge? 2 charges he got like actually done. Was it prostitution by travel?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Transportation for prostitution.
Right.
Transportation for the purposes of prostitution.
Right.
Right. So, okay. You maybe you have a stripper that comes, whatever. So that means that's illegal now. So, I mean, how does that work with the law?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. Think about guys that fly people out. When you fly somebody out and y'all gonna have sex, but that you're gonna take her shopping, you're gonna give her a little bit of money, and gonna send her back home after y'all do whatever y'all do. That could possibly be considered sex trafficking. How
at this point? So this case, this is a precedence now that's set. Even though the RICO didn't get set, this actual thing got set. I'm trying to paint a picture, right?
Yeah.
So even though one thing did get set, this particular small little thing, because I want people to understand that, hey, listen, you know what I'm saying? If you want to get some people, whatever, and bring them over, whatever.
Hitting up people on Facebook and you trying to fly somebody
and you say,
out.
Hey, I'm gonna give you a couple dollars.
Gotta be careful.
Now it's a federal offense, right? Is that how it works? Is it federal now? Like if you do
you got to be careful when you paying somebody to do something strange for a piece of change nowadays. I'm just telling you.
So I have one final question for you.
Yes.
I sat here 8 weeks. I didn't see that many of Diddy's friends show up that were celebrities, other than Kanye West and G. Dep. Family was excellent. Best support I've seen. Do you think that will affect, him going forward? Would you let those people back in your life who didn't show up for you?
I think ultimately, Puffy's a smart man. I think he realizes he didn't want to cause any problems for them.
Right. He
didn't want the light shined on them. And I think that he's understanding enough upon which he knows that they could not be there for him in that moment. And Puffy's a businessman. Let's be honest. He's a businessman. He doesn't really need them money-wise, but it would have been better to see that he had a little bit more support. But I think Puffy in his heart knows who his real ones are. Who the people he grew up with, his family that he loves and he takes care of. a few of his artists that he's looked out for and they consider that they have genuine relationships with him. He knows who his real ones are. And he didn't need this case to tell him who they were. And I think that as far as the other celebrities and this and that, Puffy's done this for a long time. Hell, we all grew up to Puffy. Let's be real. Right. We all grew up to Puffy, and we've watched his meteoric rise. We've listened to his music, whether it be rap or R&B. We've watched him, and we've really looked up to him. So, but I also think that because he's grown in this business, he understands what the business is, and he understands positioning. If somebody shows up for Puffy and they got a endorsement contract that pays them $20 million, they're going to lose that. Right. Puffy don't want people to lose that. Puffy a businessman. He about his money. So he understands that. But I think Puffy's smart enough to know that a lot of people wasn't his real friends anyway. He's I think he's a smart man. You don't get to $1 billion. You don't be one of the 2 or 3 African-American billionaires in hip hop by not knowing who your real ones are. And Puffy know who his real ones are. Right.
Why do you think most of the items that we saw in the media, like there was drugs in the baby oil, there was the no Diddy, which none of these type of things showed up, the Meek Mill, all of these lies that we heard in the media, they were not in court. Why do you think that this is a big problem in our society, people making up stuff?
I think it's a big problem because I always say this, somebody said this to me. People want to see you do good, but not better than them.
Right.
And so you have to realize that. And I'm going to tell you, I think a lot of us have some success in life. I'm a lawyer. I tell you all the time, I came from a rough neighborhood. And I had to come to the realization that everybody I grew up with ain't happy for me. There's some envy there.
You, bro. You give me hope, brother.
Exactly. I mean, I understand. I know. Like, I tell people, my heart different. Just because you wish bad for me, I don't wish bad for you. If I ever knew you, grew up with you, went to school with you, man, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be your number one cheerleader. Just because I knew you, man, I've been blessed in this life. I grew up with Erykah Badu. I'm not jealous of her. She's my friend.
Right.
I love her. I want her to have the best. I grew up with Larry Johnson that played for the New York Knicks. I love him. I have no jealousy. I want him to do great things, and he did great things. Right. I'm proud of him. But everybody's not happy for you. And in our community, sometimes we want to be the one to shine. And we want to act like Chauncey from Menace to Society. And we'll wait till they get this tape. I'm going to show you. No. I want everybody to win. You don't have to lose for me to win.
Right.
We can both win.
Real. I grew up with Soul For Real.
That's what I'm talking about. You grew up with people who made it.
I brag about them.
Listen, I was telling Mel and I was telling Genesis, Larry Johnson just went into the Texas Black Sports Hall of Fame 2 months ago. I sat with him when we had a 2-night event. I sat with him in night number 1, sat with him and his coach. I walked up to that man and told him, man, thank you because you motivated me. You made it out. Right. You are our shining light. And I pulled for you. I watched every game. We love you. Thank you. And I want you to keep rising and shining. And in our community, Mel, I'm glad you asked me that. We don't do enough of that.
Not enough.
We don't do enough of that. And we better start doing that. Because we're on an island by ourselves in this country right now. And we better realize we better lift each other up. That's what we better do.
What advice would you give Diddy if he was your client right now in helping him to get out?
Hire somebody like Calvin Johnson, because Calvin's going to tell you. No, I'm just playing. But hire you a lawyer. Hire you a team that's going to sit down with you and tell you how to better protect yourself. Hire you a team to make sure that everybody know what their parameters are, what their limits are, and what their boundaries are. Make sure that when you get in these relationships that you're careful about who you have relationships with and that you're careful about the behavior that you participate in. and consistently keep your legal team on deck. Get people you can trust, get you good counsel, and then personally just make better life decisions that you made to this point.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, I hate to say this, guy kind of spanked you on your hand a little bit, but he could have dumped you on your head and gave you a concussion and brain damage, and he didn't. You could have had your whole life taken away from you. Live every day like you're stealing a day from life and enjoy it. But do good things, do great things with the blessing that you have been given. You prayed to God that he give you a second chance. He's giving you that second chance now. Take advantage of it. That's all I would tell Puffy to do. Get you the right team around you. Look around you and see who your day ones were. Keep them folk around you. Everybody else, it's business and it's transactional.
Business, right? Colleagues. That's it.
That's it.
Calvin,
But
what
turn this
state?
into something good. Not bad.
What states do you practice in?
I practice in Texas, but because I have other attorney friends, some of friends in New York, I have some friends in North Carolina, some friends in Florida, some friends in California, some friends in Oklahoma. You can actually practice Pro Hoc Vice through some of these other states if you get an attorney in some of these other states to sponsor you. So I know attorneys from all over the country because I've worked with different folks. And then working with a professional basketball player before, I just know people from a lot of the traveling I've done, going to a lot of the NBA events, meeting with other lawyers I've developed relationships with that I still maintain today. And so I could practice in other places, but mainly I practice in Texas. I'm from Texas, like that song says.
Okay, so for the other people on the panel, I'll give you guys an opportunity to say a final word or ask a question before we shut it down.
Okay. I wanted to let you know, I'm a father's rights advocate. I've been doing this since 2016. I began studying law on my journey and my fight through a high conflict custody dispute. I got my degree as a paralegal in 2021, and I'm 12 credits away from finishing my pre-law bachelor's and seeking to go to law school, Syracuse University, within the next, I would say, a year or so. Okay. So, I love what you're doing, Brother Calvin. I got a lot of people who I try to help without giving legal advice. I'm not an attorney, so there's only so much that I can do, but helping others fight their legal battles, dads, even mothers, for 50-50 custody and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I get quite a bit of love, and I do this, freely. I can't charge because I'm not an attorney. You know what I'm saying? So I do it freely, and I get a lot of love and respect for it. So even when I become an attorney, I want to be able to do pro bono cases and be able to give back to my community, because I think it's very important that that fathers are in their lives, in their children's lives, and are able to work out, balanced relationships and such.
Yeah.
And for the children, because they're our next generation, and also, to be a positive influence. That you don't have to just be a rapper or just be a basketball player. We need more. We need more lawyers. We need more people in other positions. And
Exactly.
yeah, and that's it. So if y'all need to outsource a paralegal, I'm here for you.
All right,
That's real.
Thank you very much for coming up. Appreciate it. Okay, is it Ronald? You have any closing remarks or question?
No, sir, I don't have any. I appreciate being on here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. DJ Genesis, any thoughts before we close out?
Well, we have been doing a great job of covering this trial, and there is going to be more trials to come, you guys. We are really looking into what we're going to do next. So here's the question. So Fat Joe is a RICO that's coming up, Calvin. What impact do you think that this case is going to have on the Fat Joe case? Are you aware of that case at all?
I don't think it's a RICO. I think I thought he was being sued. He's being accused of something. I think there may be some civil stuff going on with him. I don't know if it's a RICO yet.
It's a sex trafficking lawsuit from former hype man
Yeah, but that's a lawsuit. That's not like a RICO case. That's a lawsuit. And
for
I
20
think,
million. Okay.
yeah.
So,
And with stuff like that, I'll say this. I'm very skeptical of that kind of stuff. So you mean to tell me you were a hype man for Fat Joe, and there was all this sex trafficking of younger people going on, and you have not worked for Joe for the last, 10 years ago, maybe you worked for him, and you waited 10 years and you never told anybody this behavior was going on? I mean, we got to be careful nowadays when people are making these lawsuits. And I'm not taking up for Fat Joe. I love Joe, don't get me wrong. But I will tell you, I'm very skeptical of people that say all this stuff. Yeah, he was doing this, he was doing that. And then all of a sudden, you didn't say anything. And now you want to say something, but you're saying something along with a $20 million lawsuit. Haven't we heard $20 million before? Who recently got $20 million? Cassie did. So we got to be careful when we start throwing the word RICO around. And we got to be careful when we start putting a lot of stock into what these people are doing. Because one thing I will say, and I'll say this, when you are a black man of influence and money, people come after you when you have that much money. And I think Puffy has, as I know he already knew that before this happened, but I think he's going to even be more careful now. You ain't got to worry about some of the stuff he was doing, because now after seeing how they came after him and how they coming after his money and the headache that it's caused him and his family, I'm pretty sure you won't see that again. So I want to be careful when we start talking about RICOs and we talk about sex trafficking and lawsuits, because to me, if I saw some kids being trafficked and I saw Fat Joe doing some stuff with some kids, I ain't waiting 5-10 years and then filing a civil lawsuit later on. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because what kind of person are you if you wait? Right? The average person, you see something being done to the kids, you got to report it, right?
exactly.
So that's why I say we want to be careful with that. But I think we're going to be doing other cases. The Carmelo Anthony case, of course, is down here in the Texas area, in Collin County, which is about 30 to 40 minutes away from where I live. It has been assigned to Judge John Roach, who, believe it or not, is one of my mentors, one of the people who I worked for initially or did one summer a week with him. When I started practicing law, I practiced in Dallas and Collin County, where the case is. He took me up there and introduced me to all of the judges there, showed me the ropes, and assisted me when I first started my own firm. And he has been appointed to hear the Carmelo Anthony case. So that is the next case is going on. And I know me and Mel, we're talking about with DJ Genesis doing the Kendrick Lamar Drake UMG lawsuit reports, and there's some other stuff that's come down the pipe. But listen, this super team that we have, DJ Genesis, Mel, Attorney Calvin Johnson, this is not the end of what we're going to do. I want y'all to keep tuning in. We still got sentencing to go through with Diddy. So who knows, maybe in the future when they get that court date, I think I'm going to be coming to New York and have to talk to Mel and Genesis. And I think we're going to do a live stream when he does do his sentencing. We're going to come up there and we're going to advertise and televise live and do a live and bring the information to the people. Mel has been doing a great job of that, showing up early every morning, going and reporting, doing live streams, getting DJ Genesis and people like Attorney Calvin Johnson and other lawyers and other people to come on the show to provide the information to the people. We're going to continue to do that, and we want y'all to continue to tune in to Watching the World 777. Tune in to DJ Genesis and tune in to Attorney Calvin Johnson. I also do what we call the Commiss Show with Ed Gray every Saturday at 3 p.m. I'm going to be doing this Saturday, the State of the Black Community on YouTube on the Ed Gray the Commiss Show. I do something for him. So y'all keep tuning in to us and support us. And more importantly, support Mel the Man. He's done a lot of work, man. It takes a lot of hard work to show up early, get a seat in court, and go somewhere for 8 consecutive weeks and not miss a day and bring the information to the people. We want y'all to continue to tune into us and supporting him and supporting DJ Genesis moving forward.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you guys next. When is it, Calvin? Sunday? Sunday at 2 o'clock?
Sunday at 2 o'clock. Mel, I know you're going to continue to figure out what's going on down there. And we're going to try to figure out when the actual sentencing will be set. And then we're going to try to make plans to maybe do an active live stream from New York, from the court area, when that actually happens. And so y'all continue to tune in to us every Sunday. We'll continue to bring the funk. We'll continue to bring the information. And we'll see y'all Sunday, 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Sunday.
And thank you, Donna, for the super chat. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.